and she did not want any attention in their direction. Putting a necklace back, she coughed quietly, hoping to spook him before he tried opening the cabinet. In a place like this, it was probably sealed tight with the kind of magic thieves would regret messing with. Only an idiot would attempt it. But the world was full of idiots. At her fake throat clearing, he glanced at her. Light fell across his face and caught on gleaming amber eyes. Her heart jammed itself into the vicinity of her tonsils. Choking, she whipped back to face the necklace display and took a deep, calming breath. Okay, she hadn't expected that. That being the most drop-dead gorgeous man she'd ever seen. She gave her head a slight shake. So he was a serious hunk. Whatever. Didn't change anything. At the counter, her mark was picking at a loose thread on his sleeve as he stared at other shoppers. Mr. Gorgeous had returned to his intense contemplation of the cabinet, still tapping it absently with a finger. His hood had shifted, revealing a sliver of his face, the smooth line of a cheekbone sweeping down to a strong jaw. She pursed her lips. Amber eyes. Amber was close to gold, and she knew what had gold eyes and the kind of looks that made women feverish. An incubus. Lords of seduction, masters of lust, inhumanly beautiful, flawless, sensual, the bane of self-respecting women everywhere. She nodded to herself, her nerves easing and her embarrassment fading. No big deal that he'd caught her off guard like that, and she didn't need to worry about him causing problems. Among all the magic wielders she could have encountered, incubi were pushovers. At least, that's what she'd heard, but it wasn't like she spent her free time chatting up denizens of the Underworld. In fact, she did her best to avoid them. Life was much easier that way, and she planned to keep her record nice and clean by not gawking at the sex fiend 3 feet away. But he was still tapping the glass, and the sound drew her gaze back to him. Movement at the counter snapped her thoughts back on track. The owner had returned with a long object wrapped in brown paper. The buyer turned to face him, smiling like a shark as he leaned over the counter and began unwrapping his special order. Yes, this was it. Her moment. Dropping the necklaces on a shelf, she walked toward the counter and passed a hand over her eyes to bring her other sight into focus. Light blazed everywhere, the swirling, shifting patterns of the spells that filled the shop. Before the tangle of magic could distract her, she concentrated on the man and his parcel. A chartreuse haze coated his body, his glamour, the magic that disguised his true appearance. Spelled weapons hidden on his body glowed in her vision, and his forearms were branded with green sigils she recognized as defensive spells that could deflect magical attacks. Despite his casual appearance, he was well armed, as she'd expected. But she wasn't here to dissect his magic. As the man pulled the last of the paper aside, she pinpointed the object on the counter. Red light formed a complex layering of runes that emanated from whatever lay within the wrapping. She stepped closer, intending to walk nonchalantly by on her way out the door. All she needed was one good look. A strange crackle, almost inaudible, hissed behind her, followed by a quiet pop. Reflexively, she glanced over her shoulder toward the sound, and her magical sight fell on the incubus standing at the cabinet. Disbelief obliterated all other thoughts from her head. She froze in place, mouth hanging open. If the buyer at the counter was well armed, then she didn't know how to describe the incubus. He was carrying an entire arsenal of magic. Golden weavings layered his body, so bright they almost obscured his form. Spells wrapped his wrists and arms, looped around his neck, circled his hips, and even glowed around his ankles. He had enough magic on him to blow the entire building sky high. And the spells. Her disbelief shifted to something colder, something that tasted like fear. She didn't recognize any of the spells he carried. Not a single one. She was familiar with all basic defensive and offensive weavings, as well as a large number of the less common ones. She knew them all on sight, and even the unfamiliar ones required no more than a swift assessment. But she couldn't parse any of his spells.